Hello!
Hi, welcome
to Pete and Jeremy's
You win this round.
DnDTime
It's
Talks,
not even the show.
where we discuss
It's not even the name of the
things
show,
related to
Jeremy.
Dungeons and or Dragons. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Pete.
Pete, how are you?
You win this round, Jeremy.
I'm
pretty good.
You doing good?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well myself. And chat, how are you? Good evening. The Forgotten One says, well, the Forgotten One, I've always, I'm doing well. And good evening to you as well. I've always wondered when I read your name, is it the Forgotten One, like the Forgotten One, like the Forgotten One? Or I've always wondered, can you pronounce it Defrogatin One? Have you ever thought about that, Pete? That was the first thing I thought when I was trying to sound out his name the first time because I couldn't read.
I always call it Defrog-Gotten One.
It looks like you're the closest, is from what Frog is saying in the chat. Well, hello everyone. Farful, thank you so much. 14 months of Twitch Prime subscription. God bless.
And also, Shiva and his money are here. Thank you very much, Shiva.
Yes, of course. But yeah, welcome to DnDTime Talks, the show where Pete and I discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons, and of course the chat also talks about stuff too, and we, read the chat and talk about what they have to say too. But anyway, tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about building effective characters. It's a really cool topic. The next hour or so, we're going to cover the basics of it. We're not going to go into super detail on too much stuff, but by the end, I think there's some really important takeaways on this subject.
Yeah, I agree for certain. So if you have your own ideas and things that you think we missed, I think more than a lot of the things that we talk about, this one's going to be a lot more objective of a topic where some of the things we say, and I mean, yeah, this is just how you build the most efficient character. So if you...
it's going to be interesting because I think there are definitely a couple points in here that are super subjective, and I'm going to throw some fucking punches at one point, but that's okay.
Well, we will see at the time of arrival. But if you have thoughts on those, speak up in chat here. We'll be looking at chat as we go through. And don't forget, if you have questions for us for the end for Ask Pete and Jeremy segment, please go ahead and ask those on our Discord server, which is linked below, if you're interested in that. Jeremy, want to take us in?
Yeah, so... and reflect tonight, no, we're not going in depth on the Bard. We'll probably mention the Bard at least once. But our main focus today is something that is rarely really discussed around, I'd say around here, but like in general, it's very rare that you find players discussing how to create effective characters. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people talk about making overpowered characters, or characters that are optimized is another way to say that. And there's also a lot of people who talk about making cool characters to roleplay. But we're going to be discussing not just putting together a strong character, a character that can do what they set out to do. But we're going to be discussing, like, at minimum, how to analyze that character's abilities as you level up and as you get them. Same with spells. And how to identify abilities that might be considered traps, that might make you weaker overall. This is a really important topic because, well, for a lot of reasons, it feels bad when you're bad a lot of the times. When your characters can't do what you want them to do, can feel really... you feel powerless, and that's not a great feeling. And it can also be bad for the other people at the table. And so we're going to be talking about making this effective character and trying to still maintain the flavor of whatever kind of characters we're building. They don't have to be mutual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of in recent years, just because of like the way the community has grown, I think there's a lot of like people who've started to put on a pedestal almost making kind of a weak character, and they kind of think that it's like almost virtuous and better to make a character that's like ineffective, because the idea is, well, I don't really care about my character's abilities, I want to focus on the role-playing aspect and the flavor of my character. And you can always, in my opinion, do both of those things.
Absolutely.
Um, you know, in the same regard, I think the opposite camp, like a lot of the people who think that building a weak character is bad, feel that like making a really powerful or building a weak character is good, feel that building a really powerful character and like min maxing is kind of like against the spirit, and think that like that's kind of the wrong way to play a D&D. And of course, we are firmly of the belief, and I think most people in the community at least are firmly of the belief that there is no wrong way to play D&D. But let's talk a little bit about what we mean when we're talking about an effective, because Jeremy mentioned before the difference between an optimal character, and we're not going to be really talking too much about optimizing. I think some of the stuff we talk about you could use as like a guideline to optimizing, but really optimizing is finding like the most powerful thing in a given category.
And additionally, optimizing, right, is taking every single most effective. We're
Absolutely.
just going to be talking about making sure you can identify the effective choices and take at least a few of them when you need them. An effective character doesn't have to be optimal. They can have weaknesses, they can have massive flaws, but they need to have a strength. At least
Yep.
one major strength. Even if your build is super like niche and you want to, I don't know, play I only throw weapons. That's me, the throwing weapons dude. You can do that. But there is certain ways to go about building your character to make that work and make that effective and make that a good reality, um, without being a burden. And I think that's the next kind of point we were talking about, right, Pete? Being a burden
Yeah,
as part of
absolutely.
efficacy.
Because it can be really unfun both to you and to the other people at your table if you build a character that doesn't have that one strength, that in every single aspect of your game, in particularly I think we're talking about in terms of combat, there are ways to build optimally for out of combat as well, but usually everyone has just kind of naturally some ability. I mean, you pick some skills, those are going to come up occasionally, and classes that focus on out of combat stuff, it's kind of hard not to be effective at that stuff. But we're kind of going to be focusing mostly on in combat effectiveness. And when you build a character that doesn't have any resources to be able to hold their own in combat, um, for one thing, I've seen a lot of people do this and they think that it's a great idea, and they're like really excited about it. But when they get into a combat and they realize they can't do anything, they just get really bored and they kind of get a little bit like downcast and don't have a lot of fun because they
Yeah.
don't really have the ability to contribute. And likewise, the party looks at that character and think, well, couldn't you take at least like one decent spell so that way like we would be going into challenges that we're prepared for instead of having this kind of person to carry through the fight.
Essentially, what it really boils down to is an effective character can carry their own weight. They don't necessarily have to hold up the whole party, but they have to carry their own weight. Especially if you're playing a ranged or spellcastery character, nothing's worse than being that ineffective character in the back while your party members die in front of you and then resent you letting them die. So, moving forward, let's talk about what an optimal character is, because I think that's another thing that might be misconstrued at times. Because I don't think in 5e there's necessarily one optimal option like there might have been in previous editions.
Um, well, when I think of optimal in a given category. I think if you're optimizing a character, you choose, I want to be very good at this one thing, because I don't think there's any class that you can build to actually be the best at every one thing. To be the best at
Sorcerer
everything.
Warlock. I'm sorry, not a Sorcerer
Your
Warlock.
paladin.
That's pretty good. Sorcerer Warlock is pretty good, and then Warlock. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you can get pretty close, I think, in 5th edition.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some people in this community that you could talk to about how to make the perfect character, and they would have something pretty close to that. But when you think optimization, you think you're trying to reach something. So maybe you're optimizing your character. I want to take every choice I can to make my armor class go up to the highest number I possibly can. Or I want to make every choice I can to do the most damage in like a short burst, or perhaps the most consistent damage with each attack that I make. So usually when you're optimizing towards a goal, and then picking kind of secondary goals along the way. Well, I want to do as much damage as I can, but anytime it doesn't really matter and there's no way to optimize the damage, I'm also going to try and make the other things about my character effective as well. And I think that's what it means to optimize, is to pick a goal and to get as close and as perfectly towards that goal as you can.
Yeah, for the most part. And so while building optimally can be a lot of fun, a lot of the times it doesn't really actually impact the game flow. If you really take it to the extreme, your character can be so much more powerful than the rest of the party that it does bring down the game. But far and away, for the most part, having that one paladin in the party who just does a lot of damage to one target doesn't really affect the game. It doesn't make the game a worse experience for everyone else usually. But having that one character that just can't do anything does. It can really bring the game down for everyone else at the table, especially against certain types of enemies. Like I think right off the bat of anything that can charm or dominate a party member. When you have 4 party members and one of them's basically not a character, and then one gets dominated by an enemy, those last 2 party members are very sad. And by sad, I mean probably going to die. But anyway,
couple comments from chat I want to go over here. D-Forgotten One, Swole Soror is an ineffective character, but super fun nonetheless. And if you're building something funky, like I know you got your kind of like your punch character, I wouldn't even go so far as to say that that is an ineffective character. You've gone for a very unique archetype and are trying to make that work as best you can, but you're still kind of like taking abilities that will make you good at the thing that you're trying to do. So I would still say that that's an effective character.
And along that line, a spell like Green Flame Blade, right, or Booming Blade, and Pete and I will talk about reflavoring things in a moment, but taking something like that and being like, yep, I have brass knuckles that I punch with for my Green Flame punch. That's a really good way of taking that, I just punch people sorcerer, and actually still making it a pretty good option, like an effective option. Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's bad necessarily at all.
I certainly agree. Psychopath, difference between effective and power characters. Yep, absolutely. Sword, everything in moderation. Roger Fly, the guy that can feign death better than anyone else in the world. Bionic Shiva says, it's fine to be useless as long as you're entertaining while doing it. I don't know if that's
only true to a degree, I think. There's a point in every game where something bad is going to happen to the players. And in DnDTime, it's dialed back a little bit because we're so goofy.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily is true in DnDTime.
There's that moment in any like real campaign that people play where something really serious happens, right? And the party has to kind of deal with that. And man, when you have that one character that just isn't pulling their weight, and they're not pulling their weight because of that aloof, I want to make them bad. It just, people turn against that really fast. It turns into like, oh, you're just trying to make us die. You're actively not helping. It gets bad. And even like very mild-mannered, friendly parties can have that. That's not like only mean, bad people do this. That happens. Yeah. People get frustrated when they fail.
And as always, I'll put the asterisk. Maybe there's parties that enjoy that, and if that's the case, if you know that your whole party is cool with it, then rad.
Exactly. Always be completely in with the rest of the party.
Yep. And this is a side note, if you have a build like that you want to do that is going to be completely useless, that's a thing that you should absolutely talk to your DM and your party about before going in to a game. That's definitely on the that should be a session 0 topic for sure.
Well, and even then, we can pick options, and we'll talk about this a little bit, that like, even if it's not a useful option, like a pacifist character, you can pick spells like Command or Hold Person that are, those don't damage people, but they're still effective.
Yeah, well, let's get right into that, Jeremy, because we're talking
Yeah,
a little
let's
bit
just
about
dive in.
yeah, a little bit about like kind of mechanics and flavor, and a little kind of mantra I've come up with here to remember that is mechanics can always be reflavored, but flavor can never be
Yep,
remechanicked.
absolutely.
Um, there is pretty much nothing in the game that, with your imagination and the ability to just kind of basically change the way you think about a move, but still use the text of it, that you can't, I think, make fit to a character. Like what Jeremy was talking before, you want to have this kind of like punch sorcerer. Well, you take Green Flame Blade, an ability that makes your attacks empowered with like flame magic, and you decide, well, that's my magic brass knuckles, is the example that he gave before. What you can't do is well, I want to have magic brass knuckles. I'll just change the spell Firebolt so that it goes on my hands. That does not work. You can't make spells into different things unless you're homebrewing and talking to your DM. But we're not going to get into any of that right now.
Well, and even that reflavoring, important to talk to your dungeon. There's a
Indeed.
liberty with what I said there. And what I said makes sense for games that I run and for DnDTime, but might not necessarily fly in yours. Maybe you need to actually use a cantrip like Shocking Grasp and just reflavor it as you're punching. But yeah, I think it works either way.
Um, but personally, I have never heard of someone come up with an idea for a character that I have thought, well, that's impossible for you to reflavor and to build that in the rules of 5e within the context of kind of a high fantasy setting, naturally. Um, I think that it's always it's always able to be justified, a
Oh,
build
yeah.
via the kind of flavoring. And I think you can have any flavorful character, you can make that in 5e. And even if you want to have a lot of really flavorful options, it's important to make sure you also just have a couple of like reliable options that are also effective.
And that's the key, reliability. You can have your crazy gambit of all right, my strategy is I cast Fabricate to create a piano. I use Levitate to levitate it 500 feet in the air. Then I hold person, break my concentration of Levitate, so the piano falls on them and they die. You can have that be your gimmick,
But
but you
you
need
also have
something
Eldritch
reliable like,
Blast.
yeah, exactly. You need Eldritch Blast to fall back on, or something like that. But actually, it's interesting because we're talking about niche builds a little bit with the and Frog. We do not mean to like call you out here. Actually, it's just a really awesome concept to talk about. Is this punching sorcerer, right? Let's talk about what it takes to make something like that effective, both as like a regular character, like your standard I cast spells a lot sorcerer, and a I punch people with magic sorcerer. And I think the first step toward being effective, no matter what, is making sure you have stats to back yourself up.
Yeah. That is a sorry, I was just reading something in chat there. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's a great point. You always want to have you always want to have your highest stat in your primary ability. That is something that, in my opinion, is immutable. I don't think you should. I don't think that anyone should ever not put their highest stat in their primary thing. Now, it might be different. I mean, for example, there's certain classes that have different primary things. Like you might be playing a ranger or a paladin, which have kind of two primary stats where you need your wisdom and your dexterity as a ranger, or I guess you could also go a strength build. And especially as martial classes, there's a lot of different options you might end up choosing depending on your build. But you want to pick one kind of optimal thing. For example, if you're going to barbarian, I definitely don't think you should ever take a 10 in strength and you're 18 in intelligence. Because you're just going to be weaker. And if you want to play a barbarian that has some intelligence, you can just kind of do that. You can just choose to role play intelligently. And even if your numbers don't reflect that, you can just kind of justify that with, well, my intelligence is an 8, so I don't have a lot of like book knowledge, but my character isn't dumb. He just doesn't know a lot. And you can always find a way to justify the character that you want to play.
Like Pete said, mechanics can always be reflavored, but flavor cannot be remechanic. If you make your character very, very smart, that's fine. It's great. But if you put that 8 in int, well, you're not going to be that smart. Likewise, you can say your character is real strong, but if you have an 8 in strength, you're not going to be real strong when push comes to shove. So in a situation like that with the barbarian, right? You need to be strong. That's the core of your barbarian class. Put your highest stat in strength. And then it's a secondary thing, maybe put like a 13 or a 14 in your,
Yeah.
if you really care about being true to that flavor and not just role playing it of I just don't have book smarts, but I figure things out because that's how I live in the barbarian wilderness. Um, so just keep that stuff in mind, right? You have to make those calls, you have to make those choices, and like Pete was saying, you never want to take that reliable ability that we were talking about earlier, your reliable combat option. You always want that to be. And speaking about that, talking about the sorcerer, the punching the sorcerer, right? Your fist sorcerer. So in that situation where we have the sorcerer who uses a dagger, which we call brass knuckles because it's cool, and they punch a lot. Having just a high stat in your charisma is good because sorcerers use charisma, but you also need something in your dexterity. That is your secondary stat in that. It's not constitution or whatever else you'd normally pick. It's your dexterity because that's what you use for your dagger. So keep that kind of stuff, or I guess it could be your strength.
Yeah, in this case,
strength dagger, which probably makes more sense for a sorcerer.
Yeah, for the sorcerer.
You got to make sure you have that stuff intact, in mind. It's a very good idea to like, just because usually the primary stat for sorcerer is charisma, it's not necessarily the case for Nietzsche. So you just have to keep all that stuff in mind.
Yeah, I see V Bunny was saying that in chat too. You can be a barbarian with high con instead of strength. Yeah, absolutely. That's the build you want to go.
You need strength.
Yes,
you can't just say, I'm going to have a 16 con and a 10 strength. Otherwise, you're going to be a very bad barbarian.
That's
true. That's just the truth of it. And part of building efficiently is making a character that can play the game. So you have to keep that in mind. Otherwise, you're just not going to be doing anything while all of your friends die around you and you don't die because you have a lot of health.
And as a general rule for kind of building optimally, and I think that this is a great first kind of rule, just always pick high numbers. When you have the opportunity to make a number higher, choose to do so. As an example of this, let's say that you're playing let's say that you're playing a barbarian. You're like, oh, well, I really want to use like a big club, but the club is so much weaker than like something bigger I could use, like a great sword or a great axe or a maul. Odds are, for one thing, that you could just talk to your DM and say, hey, can my maul that's the optimal weapon for my class just look like a club? And they'll say, yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's it.
And that doesn't work when you get to magic items. But when you're getting to magic items, you're already being very strong. So we're already pushing the boundaries of magic items anyway. But early on, I highly recommend that stuff.
Yeah, if you have multiple armor classes, like for example, another thing about the barbarian, I feel like a lot of people just kind of go unarmored defense for barbarian because it's like the class feature and they want to be like the shirtless monster. You can, a lot of the time, you can just get a higher number if you just wear the armor. And then once you get kind of higher up in level and your barbarian power kind of scales, you get a bigger dex, a bigger con. That unarmored defense eventually outscales the armor. But at the beginning, a lot of the times you can just be more effective by choosing to wear armor. And you can, again, reflavor things probably, maybe to a lesser extent there, but describe, that your armor, maybe it is, something
broken
very
from
unique.
my rippling biceps.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different things I think you can do to use that ability and still make it feel cool for your character.
And these are all examples, right, of effective choices. You don't have to do every single one. If you're really sold, right, on having your barbarian not wear any armor, that's fine. You can do that. You're not going to be so much weaker for having done so. But you better damn make sure you made some optimal choices elsewhere, some effective choices elsewhere to make up for that.
You have to make some effective choices or some optimal choices.
If at least half of your choices are effective, you're probably going to have a pretty decent.
Yeah,
you can pick some ineffective spells. It's not the end of the world as long as you have some effective spells. Another thing we see all the time in DnD time, and if you've done this in DnD time, no shame meant. Feel free, we're cool with people revising characters a little bit in D&D time, but is when you get an ability score increase at level 4 and then again at level 8 and then again at level 12, put that in your best stat.
Yep.
Every time. There are some exceptions, like if you're playing outside of D&D time and there are feats that are options, sometimes you could go with those.
Mm-hmm.
But I would always recommend, especially in D&D time, put that in your best stat. Making your 8 into a 10 doesn't make a difference. You're still not going to be good at whatever that is.
And I can absolutely, I can absolutely understand why people have a desire to do that, because you look at the 8 on your character sheet and you're like, well, I don't think my character's that unlikable. I don't want him to have a penalty to this. I'm just going to no, just take that 18. Just go up from 16 to 18.
Yeah.
Or I guess 15 to 17.
And I see some stuff going up in chat. By next year, if you feel personally assaulted, I'm sorry, bud. And Fluffy, I played Wizard and I buffed out Dex rather than Int. I mean, there are some exceptions to these, of course. And obviously, Fluffy, who turns into Beast a lot, doesn't care about his Wisdom as much, so he put it into Constitution for more health. There are exceptions to everything we say
Absolutely.
Here. But as a general rule, it's very important to make those high stats your best stats. And this is kind of a broader category we've just kind of jumped into, which is when you're making a character, focus. Don't generalize.
Yep. That's kind of our second big rule.
Yeah, if you go too far into just, I can do everything, you end up being mediocre at everything.
Odds are if you can do everything, there's someone in the party that's better at each thing that you can do than you are, and that just feels bad. Like, you're never important because you're never the best at one thing. And that's what it means to be a D&D party in a lot of respects. It's shoring up for each other's weaknesses, and each of you has one strength, and that's kind of why you party together, is because you make up for each other's weaknesses.
Exactly. And so even though your barbarian has an int of 8, and that, make that strength an 18, because when you come across the boulder that has collapsed in the tunnel and you're trying to flee from the kobolds who are chasing you, that barbarian is going to be the one in the party who can lift that boulder up so the party can get past. And if you don't make their strength good, no one's going to lift up the boulder and they're all going to die. Likewise, when there's an elaborate, arcane rune, your barbarian's probably not going to decode it with a 10. So.
And this is kind of, I think, in the same category of making sure that you've kind of have in the area of focus instead of being kind of generalized. There are a lot of things in the PHP, what Jeremy was talking about quite a while ago, he mentioned this, there are a lot of quote-unquote traps in the player's handbooks. And these are things that, there are a lot of abilities, and I'm going to mention one very kind of easy to, I think, a very easy to identify.
We'll talk about a couple.
But this is, for example, a Warlock one, where some of the Eldritch invocations that you can get as Warlock are just very, very poor. And they don't add power to your class. They instead add utility, making you more generalized, but without giving you any additional strength. An example of this is I believe it's called Sculptor of Flesh. There's one, and there's a series of these that do comparable things, but specifically this one, it allows you to cast the polymorph spell once a day using one of your Warlock spell slots. So you're not gaining any additional power. You're not gaining an extra spell slot. You're not gaining the ability to do more things. You're just gaining the ability to do one different thing that's already kind of roughly around the same power level of things that you can already do. A slight increase in utility when you could use that same Eldritch Invocation slot to take something like, Agonizing Blast, which is a quintessential Warlock cantrip that makes all of your Eldritch Blasts do your Charisma modifier and damage. It makes you a lot more powerful as a Warlock.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a handful of other traps that you'll find in the player's handbook. Feats, there are a lot of feats that just don't increase your power level. And while they can be really cool for flavorful reasons, like linguist, I want my character to speak a lot of languages because that's part of the character's background. Here's the secret: get your languages from your background.
I've taken linguist before.
And then, well, in later on, once you've maxed out that primary stat and you have your your reliable combat ability, solidified and good, then you can start taking those. But if you take linguist at level 4, everyone else gets a +2 to one of their primary stats, and you learn 3 languages. And I'll tell you, one of those things is a lot more powerful than the other. And
Yep.
it's not like by a small margin. It's a very large margin. And even if it's a +1 difference to hit and to damage, that ends up going a long way, especially over the 16 more levels you might be playing while you're trying to catch up. He's
Yep.
always on the behind frame.
Yeah, it'll just kind of put you on the back foot.
And I mean, I personally have my opinion about some other classes. I think there are a lot of traps in the Ranger, but we can talk about the Ranger another time. Maybe I don't. Let's not throw up fisticuffs.
Someday we'll argue about the Ranger on. We'll argue about the Ranger on stream. So let's move on to another kind of major archetype of kind of building effectively, and this is one that I think is very easy to kind of miss, and that is managing your action economy. And that comes not, I mean, it's obvious that you kind of take track of what abilities you can do and make sure you use everything on your turn when you're playing and you're in combat, but you need to kind of start visualizing that while you're making your character and while you're making choices. Because a thing that is a really common mistake is, well, you get these 4, I would say 5 basic things that you that use your action economy. There's your action, your bonus action, your reaction, and then I would say concentration as a spellcaster is also kind of in this category, and your move action technically, but that's
not really too relevant.
Yeah, it's not too relevant. Don't stack up your character entirely with features that use just one of these things, because then if all of your characters, for example's abilities, are based around doing reactions and kind of like, reacting to the enemy's abilities, well, you only get 1 reaction per round. So you're just going to end up wasting all of these other, maximum. So you're just going to end up wasting all these other abilities that you could have been using at the same time.
I have seen, even from like veteran experienced players, them come into a game not really having thought too much, just kind of pick some spells that they know that they like, and they go into combat and they start playing and they're like, damn, I've used 1 spell this whole combat because every spell that I picked is a concentration spell. And I still am concentrating on that first spell, and I'm so bored. And having some other spell options that aren't concentration is really, really important, even if the spell seems a little weaker than maybe a concentration one. That's an important thing to note, to kind of try and mentally balance a little bit. And even if it's just one other option that's not concentration to fall back on, like a magic missile, for example.
Yep.
It's good to have. It's very, very good to have. Or scorching ray is actually, like, I think probably the optimal one to fall back.
But yeah, especially if you're going the arcane caster, I think scorching ray's got to be the best.
I think so. Agonizar is Scorcher, but it doesn't matter. We're not discussing optimal. We're discussing
Chromatic Orb's a good pick.
Yeah, and let's talk about bonus actions too, right? Like when you look at it's kind of hard to pick one off the top of my head that has a bunch of bonuses.
As an example right here, let's say that you're playing a barbarian, and you're planning on playing a frenzied barbarian. A thing that a lot of barbarians end up taking is the Great Weapon Master feat. But if you're playing a frenzied barbarian, you're using your bonus action every single turn, odds are, to make a weapon attack. And one of the features that Great Weapon Master gives you is when you kill an enemy or score a critical hit, you can use your bonus action to make a weapon attack. Those don't stack. You can only use one of those weapon attacks a turn. So by combining, if you're planning on going Great Weapon Master build, by combining the Frenzied ability and the Great Weapon Master, you only get about half of the benefit of either of those features that you would end up getting, because you just can't use one of the primary aspects of it because you only get one. There's I think a lot of stuff like that you end up taking. Like I know as a rogue, taking like any reaction spell as a rogue is going to get you in trouble, because you're going to be if you go the Arcane Trickster, because you're going to be uncanny dodging almost every turn because that ability is so powerful.
And if we throw feats into the mix, there are all sorts of other things that get caught up. But yeah, it's really important to keep a note on all this. And when you're looking at spells, not only looking at the ones that don't have concentration, look at the ones that are bonus actions too,
Yeah.
because that can be cool, especially if you need to use an action to say stabilize an ally. That's something that happens in combat like frequently, or feed an ally a potion if you're not in D&D time. Uh, you know, being able to take your action to do that sucks if there's nothing else you can do. If your only action in turn is walk toward the huge monster that just murdered your friend and stabilize your friend and stand there waiting to die, oh, that's not a turn you like.
That's
But a
a
turn you do
bad
like
turn.
is doing that and then casting your spiritual weapon to strike them down, right? Or a big bee's hand, as Psychopath is saying in chat. These are all, really cool ongoing things.
As a hybrid kind of caster and martial character, be very careful about your cantrips. I think
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen a lot of fighters take Eldritch Knights take just offensive cantrips when they're almost always better off just using their weapon because they're so much better at hitting with their weapon. They'll end up, if they take say a frost bolt, they'll just throw out a frost bolt when why would they ever use that ability? They can just swing their greatsword and deal 2d6 and have extra attack on top of it rather than throwing their weak frost bolt at them.
Exactly. And if you are going to pick cantrips and you want offensive cantrips because you want that battle magic, look at stuff like Scorching Ray, I'm not Scorching Ray, Green
Booming
Flame
Blade.
Blade and Booming Blade as great alternatives. Or, if you are going to pick like a Firebolt, for example, that's a great one because it's range if you're a melee fighter. There's a reason to have it. But just casting it for the sake of casting it, usually you're more effective just using your sword. This is the class you picked, the fighter, not the mage.
And as spellcasters, really look for those. There's some great value spells that don't use concentration. Reflected Today was calling out Sanctuary is one. That's a good one.
Absolutely.
There is like Mirror Image, I think is a great one. Spiritual Weapon is Spiritual Weapon is. There's so
good.
It's such an incredibly good spell. It feels incredible. It feels less like a spell and more like just part of the cleric class, honestly. And I guess it is a class specific spell.
It is one of those optimal spells.
Yeah. It's also optimal flavor-wise. It's just so good.
But yeah, so just again, we've said it a whole bunch, and I'm going to say it another time. You do not have to do everything we say here. If you do everything we say here, you make an optimal character, which is fine if that's how you want to play. But you need to do some of the things we say. This is one of the ones you have to do it. Otherwise, it's just not going to end well.
Yeah, it won't be fun. Like
someone will not have a good time because of your option. You're just
probably you.
Maybe more than you two.
So another kind of overarching idea in terms of building a character, and I don't know how I didn't have a ton to say on this particular matter, but just to bring it up, also go out of your way to just find synergies and find different ways that your abilities are going to react to each other, and that is in the territory now of you're going to be starting to build optimally when you're starting to like actively look for abilities that combine. But there are some really simple and obvious ones that are baked in. For example, the Tempest Cleric has an ability that allows them to amplify magic that is thunder or lightning damage based. So when you see that in your cleric ability, think, I'm going to take some spells that deal lightning or thunder damage. So I can use this feature that I have. And it goes a lot more in depth than that, but that's just like a good overarching mindset to have when you're building a character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, another concept, right? If you're playing a bunch of spellcasters, maybe that hold person spell isn't really that effective. But if you're the one wizard with 3 martial characters in your party, that hold person spell becomes a lot more effective because it paralyzing the enemy matters a lot more for all of your allies, right? You can be effective without doing damage. That's perfectly fine. And if you're something like a sorcerer, for example, and you're kind of slow on spell slots, maybe you pick spells that have dual value, like levitate. You can use that to levitate an enemy. You can use it to levitate yourself. You can use levitate an object. I personally love that spell as a cool triple threat. is just a single spell that does 3 really cool things. Useful everywhere, in combat, out of combat, just great. But yeah, synergies is good. That was unrelated to synergies. But
yeah,
I just like levitate because I forgot to say
do that thing. No, it's a cool spell.
It's a great spell. It's the best.
And with that, Jeremy, I honestly didn't have, in terms of building effectively, I mean, that's kind of like a lot of the kit. Not too many other like tricks to it, really. I mean, there a lot of the rest of it, I think, is just really taking your time, looking over, and actively thinking when you're building a character. Like, kind of ask yourself the question: is this effective? Am I going to like be able to hold my own weight and be part of a party effectively?
Yeah, exactly. I see spell coming out in the chat, reflecting today. Healing Word is so gloriously broken. It's a very great spell.
Yep.
Picking a couple really great spells is all you really need. You can play an effective wizard with maybe 4 good spells. You take Shield, you take Scorching Ray, you take Fireball, and what's a good level 4 spell? I don't even know if you need a good level 4 spell.
Banishment.
Polymorph, Banishment, whatever. Those 4 spells between spell levels 1 and 4, which are character levels 1 through 8. With those 4 spells, you're an effective wizard. You can pick any other spell in the game you want. Any. It doesn't matter. You can even pick like some trap abilities, right? Like funny, this is a trap, I think, ability. It's called Detect Traps or Find Traps. It's a level 2 spell. And all it does is it tells you if there are traps nearby. And the reason I think that spell is a trap is it does a couple things. One, it doesn't tell you where the trap is. It just tells you there is one, at least one. Only if there's at least one. And secondly, and probably the most important thing, if you're casting Find Traps, you already suspect there are traps. The best it can do is tell you there aren't traps. And do nothing.
You are right.
Like,
if I ever have a player cast that, your spell book begins to glow.
And the page turns into a different spell. No, but I mean, if you want, you can pick that spell if you have those 4 wizards, like as a wizard in the example. And actually, I think those 4 spells, Sorcerer also has. So you could do that with a Sorcerer as well.
Yep, Shield is such an incredibly powerful spell.
Yeah, and just with those couple options, you are an effective character, and you can do anything else, like any other silly, ridiculous spells you want.
Go crazy.
You can forget to prepare any more spells. And just be like, oh yeah, I ripped all the pages out of my spell book. Don't need that no more. I got my 4 spells, and you're fine. Like, actually, you're fine. So it's not too. Just make sure you make the right choices when you need.
Yeah, that's very much my philosophy as well. I remember one of my favorite builds I did over the run of DnDTime Delves. I was playing a wizard, and I built his entire kit, and I think it was like I needed like 6 or 7 different spells for my entire vision to pay off, and the end result was me being able to cast a force cage and then put all the enemies into a force cage. Was the goal of my spell. I ended up using it differently because it's D&D and nothing ever goes as you plan.
You hid in the force cage.
And we hid in the force cage with the same spell. And I had like taken an arcane eye, and part of my plan was to like build the force cage in a different room and then use my arcane eye to like see into that room so that I could scatter them into the other room with the force cage. This is all ridiculous and was really convoluted, but I had regular spells that I could use so that my whole kit wasn't just this one dumb thing that I wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. But hold on to those dumb things. They're fun. They're part of what makes the game great. Another really great way to have those, to really, I feel like make a character weak, but in a good way, right? Because it can be fun to have a character that sucks at something. When you roll for stats and you get those low stats, don't be like, hey, DM, I rolled like a 5. Can I re-roll it? Yep. No, stick with that 5. Cool. Put that 5 in something that is not Constitution, and you're fine. Right? Put that 5 in Intelligence. And like, yeah, my character's very stupid. And that's a fun role-playing. Likewise, you don't have to have a 5 decide your character's stupid. You can just put a 10 or an 8 in there and decide my character's stupid, and role-play them the exact same way.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. Now, if you put like an 18 in your intelligence and try and roleplay that your character's stupid, that kind of is a disconnect. But
But you could probably even make it work.
yeah, exactly. Maybe your character's just very lucky whenever their intelligence is tested, right?
Or like maybe they're really smart and they have memorized all of the things that are in their spell book, but that's it. That's the end of it. They just know the words and are basically just like reading the recipe when they're casting spells. There's definitely a lot of ways you could come up with and justify whatever it is that you want, like we were saying before.
Well, another thing to consider, and I know we're talking a lot about spell casting now, and we're kind of into the minutia, but I think the bulk of the conversation's basically concluded.
Yeah.
There are certain spells that part of being effective is also not part of being effective is also not making your allies ineffective. Spells like darkness, fog cloud, these are spells that can be very good for an individual character, but when they make the rest of the party less effective, they're bad choices.
Yep.
And to be frank, it kind of makes you a bad player, not like mechanically bad, just bad to play with if you use those things and hurt your allies. So keep that kind of stuff in mind. If you want to use, a great example is, the optimal path for the Warlock is going like Devil's Sight and Eldritch Invocation, lets you see through the magical darkness, and the Darkness spell to always have advantage on your Eldritch Blasts and always have disadvantage for enemies because of the magical darkness. But if you're using that and preventing all your allies from seeing, you're actually really being a detriment. Like Pete mentioned earlier, focus over generalization, make yourself strong, because as a party, you shore up each other's weaknesses. And if you make everyone else in the party weaker, you're not shoring up weaknesses, you're just making everyone weaker.
And I mean, there's nothing less fun. Like, it's bad to get stuck in darkness by the enemy, but like everyone gets mad when they get messed up by an ally's AoE. That always feels bad. And except for, I think the one exception is the rare situation where there's like a low health enemy and they're going to toss the fireball and the barbarian's just like, do it, I'll just take the damage. And they don't care, and that's dramatic. But fog, cloud, darkness, those ones feel terrible.
Yeah, I mean, fog cloud I've seen especially, because and I can understand the desire to be that little bit of chaos in your game. Like, fog cloud, no one can see. Maybe you pick and choose when you do that. The goofy, we're level 5 and we got attacked by 4 level 1 bandits. All right, go ahead and throw the fog cloud down and be a troll. When one of the party members is down because of the ancient dragon's breathing down your neck, don't just throw the fireball to troll around. Don't throw the fog cloud to troll around.
So with that, Jeremy, because I don't have too much more to say on this topic, I don't know if you have anything to wrap up with. And I guess to wrap up, build characters effectively, which doesn't mean, to repeat the mantra, you can always, what was it? You can always reflavor mechanics, but you can't remechanic flavor. You can't, but flavor can't be remechanicked. I wrote it myself and I can't remember it. Want to ask Pete and Jeremy?
Yeah, this is the subject segment of our show where Pete and I jump onto our Discord server, head down to the Ask Pete and Jeremy channel, and look at the questions you've left for us to answer. Usually, they're bizarre questions about ourselves, but often they're about Dungeons and Dragons, which is what we're here to talk about. So, Pete, without further ado, what is our first Ask Pete and Jeremy question this evening? Oh, and if you all have questions, by the way, you can just jump onto our server. You can find links below and post. Oh boy, there's a whole bunch of questions.
Oh, geez, Crowley. All right.
Crowley.
Who is your favorite fictional character from Crowley? Jeremy?
God.
That's
my favorite fictional character? That's not an answerable question. Like, you need to shorten that. You need to tighten that category up.
It's not Bucket, Jeremy?
No, it's not. I mean, there are a lot of fictional characters I really love. A hedonism bot from Futurama. The robot devil from Futurama. Tinny Tim from Futurama. There's a lot of... Wait, they're all Futurama.
My best pick is going to be Iskandar the Conqueror, who's based on Alexander the Great, so I don't know if he counts. He's basically fictional in the show. From Fate Zero, I'm a big fan of him.
All right.
That's a pick.
I'm going to go with Hedonism Bot. Our next question: do you have a favorite set of dice? Well, we know you do.
Yeah, I've talked about this before. I got my wooden dice that I call the drama dice.
They are beautiful
Yep.
and dramatic as hell. I actually don't. There was a time, or a couple of times, where I did, but at this point, I prefer, since I just mostly DM, I don't think I have a favorite set, but I like to take out certain sets and imply that they mean bad things. There's one set that I very infrequently use because I call them the player killer dice. None of my players that I play with live realize I've never killed anyone, but they get really scared every time I take them out. So maybe those. Crowley asks, how do you feel about dice versus minis? I don't know. I love minis and I love dice.
I like both. I mean, I guess if I had to like
I like
greater,
minis more.
I'm a dice man, so I guess that's it.
Yeah. You have a lucky die. Nope.
I guess my collected set of 4 lucky dice. I also have like my first die I ever got, my first D20, which I guess is kind of a lucky die. I've never thought of it as lucky, but I'm lucky and I use it, so I guess it's a lucky die.
Who's going to win the Legend Tier Battle Royale?
Not Bartholomew, he's dead. Damn it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll put my money on Selkris.
Yeah, I mean, Selkris.
I think she's got a chance at losing right now, and I think if she does, it goes to one of the clerics, or maybe Kurogan. But I think it's a pretty open fight right now. In one level, it goes to Selkris, which is that Bone Devil.
I'm gonna make my bet. I'm going to make my bet based on raw ability, no allies or team ups or politics.
Oh,
I'm gonna say Selkris still.
I don't know. I'm actually kind of.
I'm just thinking of that.
I think it's Yachankas, actually.
No, I'm thinking of that big. I'm thinking of that ice, that frozen domain.
Yachankas always single targets with his lightning bolt because usually it's one enemy. He can multi-target. If he gets two allies or two enemies within 15 feet of each other, or within 10 feet of each other, he can lightning bolt or call lightning and hit 2 of them.
I'm just
max out the damage on 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm just banking on Selkris's Levistus's tomb.
With the very strong.
Yeah.
But Kurogan can just last forever, and Lance can hold 2 concentrations. So this is very hard.
We'll see. That's my bet, though. Would be Selkris.
I don't know. I think after this level. But
where do you want to go most on vacation, Jeremy?
Jeez, where do I want to go most on vacation? I kind of, and this is a weird. I want to go on a cruise down in like the Caribbean. I've never been on a cruise before, and I just kind of like would like to experience it and decide I dislike it. But I want to try it. You know what I mean? And then the Bahamas are just nice, so that if I do decide I dislike the cruise, it'll be pleasant. Oh, actually, maybe to Norway. Your Viking cruises some great deals.
I have a lot of different answers because I have a lot of things I would like to do with certain people, which kind of affects my vacation. But I think like if it was just a Pete solo mission, I would really like to see Japan.
Oh, very nice. I mean, be cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite trap, and when will you use it against us? Wink. What's your favorite bear and your favorite big cat?
Wait, I like pitfalls. I do want to answer it. I like pitfall traps.
Mine is just wink. My favorite bear and favorite big cat. Bear. I don't know. I kind of like, is it the Kodiak bears that are the big ones that really aren't that scary? But they're just big? I think so. Maybe those guys.
I think every bear's scary. Bears are terrifying.
Yeah, bears
are. Yeah, I don't know. Cat. The red pandas, are those bears? Do they count?
Maybe.
Those are dope as hell.
Kind of like
but if not grizzly bear.
And then favorite big cat. I'm just gonna pull one and say the snow leopard.
Panther, maybe. Panthers are dope as hell.
Panthers are sick. What is your favorite bard college? Asks Reflected Tonight. All of those questions, by the way, up to now have been from Crowley. Thank you, Crowley.
Lore.
Lore. All right. In agreement.
Yeah.
Both flavor and mechanically. Just like it best.
High magic, low magic, or no magic? What is your favorite setting? I will say not no magic. I like there to be magic in my setting. High and low, I mean, I think if I have too much of either, I would get sick of it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get sick of stuff, but I really, right now, I've got a hankering for low mag. It's not that I have one all-time favorite. I just kind of go between them, and right now I'm feeling low mag.
Yeah, I'm about the same. I switch these.
Still using 5e, are there any settings other than medieval fantasy that you would be interested in running that you think would be cool? I.e. modern, western, steampunk, cyberpunk, renaissance, etc. Yeah, 100%. I was talking actually with the Fox in the Box earlier today, or the other day, I don't know. But I was talking to him, it's like, oh, how's it going? And it came to my mind, this thought. I would love to play just DnDTime Star Trek with the cast of like the Legend crew, and then some of the myth players are like the random other members on the ship, and it's just you're in a spaceship flying through the world, but it's the exact same as D&D time. It's just in space. It's like Star Trek, basically. I would love it.
I've always wanted to do a
Fluffy
pure
could be
sci-fi
Geordie
D&D.
LaForge. Sorry, go ahead.
I've always wanted to do a pure sci-fi D&D 5e.
There we go. I guess we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Have you ever broken a bone? Asks Reflected 10-8. And if so, what is the most you've ever broken at once? I broke an arm when I was young. I remember nothing about the arm being broken, but I remember riding my bike down a staircase. I remember that vividly. How about you, Pete?
Sword Co here says, "Damn it! I already know I'd end up being a red shirt. You're not a red shirt. You're Sword Co here. You have a name."
Sword. I'm pretty sure you're the first mate. You're like the Riker here. Oh, Adrian P, it's our 1 year. Kiss you. Thank you. Thank you for 12 months of support, Adrian.
Thank you so much.
Greatly appreciated. Pete, have you ever broken a bone?
I think I broke my finger, but I never went to get it fixed, and it healed.
Okay. Do you shoop or swoop before you do what? No. Sorry, Frog, I don't understand the question.
I think it's like a shoop duwa or a swoop duwa, and I think the answer would be shoop. If I was going to sing a song where it was like shoopa doopa wah or swoop doo doop doo wah, I would always go shoop. It'd be shoop.
100%.
That's my answer.
Also, Sword, come on. Everyone knows Byoshi would be Wesley. No offense, you. I tease. Tonight asks, do you have any objects that hold a strangely strong emotional bond to you? If so, what made this bond? That is a awfully deep question.
I have an answer. I've shown it before. I have a little. I've also talked about this guy before. I have a little orange dinosaur that I've named Jeffy that I've had for a really, really long time. Who I lost and dropped in, I guess, a relative's yard, and then lost him for a year, and then found him under a stone in some gravel like a year later, and it blew my mind. And since then, we've been inseparable. And I have a really strong bond with that particular object.
Mine was probably my lengthiest owned possession, I guess you could call it. Not like longest, but I've had it for literally my entire life. It is a white stuffed bear, like a little polar bear. It's just a teddy bear. And I think I still have it packed up. I know I have it packed up in the other. And I have had that since I was 4 hours old or something. So that's been mine ever. And I love that. And if you ever did anything, cut you. Oh, Jamie has it right now. Next question is Reflecting 10-8. You can spend a day in real life with one character from D&D time, not player. Who do you bring into the real world?
I am the trash can.
Oh, no. You've been holding that one. Who do I bring into the real world?
I don't think that would be it.
A character. I assume we're talking about player.
No, he said
And not
non-player.
Oh. No, I thought he meant like you spent with a character but not the player. So like I wouldn't be hanging out with Reflected 10, I'd be hanging out with Lance Silver. I think is the idea. Maybe I'm misreading that. Otherwise, I think Frog has it. Philip Q. Janglebones is just the correct answer there.
Is it Philip Q. Janglebones?
I think it's Philip Q. Janglebones.
I feel like there's someone that we're forgetting about that would be great to hang out with, and I can't think of who it is.
I don't think there is. Oh, Asbjorn would be kind of cool. But
I mean, he'd just be kind of chill.
An NPC or a character. So yeah, okay. Yeah. And if it were a character, I don't know. There's
too hard. Too hard.
Probably Kurogan, because it'd be like, Kurogan, I've known you since you forever.
I've known you since you were a wee baby.
Yeah, really. How do y'all feel about cows? I mean, they're cows. They're tasty. Blood Deuce asks, and I think this is our last question for the evening before we tune out. So thank you, everyone. Blood Deuce asks, when did you first realize that cows are actually the worst animals ever? I haven't realized that yet.
Just when you said it just now, that was when I figured it out.
Oh wait, you figured it out?
Yeah, apparently. When I finished reading that sentence and Blood Deuce brought it up, I was like, oh wait, they are.
Oh crap! I'm looking at the chat right now. Victorious would be a great answer.
Victorious
would be dangerous. You would just die of poison.
I could hang with Victorious. Me and Victorious would be friends.
And Victorious is a bro. I think Victorious is like, but he's one of those kind of bros that's like a very open, friendly bro. I feel like.
Yeah, he's not an
elitist bro.
He's not your Chad. He's your
He's your Victorious.
Yeah, your Logan.
So I think Victorious would be a good option, and Lance Silverblood would be a pretty chill option. I think it's Selkris would just beat me up, Frog. Anyway, we're getting distracted. Thank you, everyone. Oh, sorry, Pete.
No, I'm just thinking. I feel like there's a character I really want to chill with that I'm just forgetting about, and it's gonna tear me up. I don't know. I give up.
Well, Pete, you gotta just keep thinking about it, and
maybe it's Grimbo.
By the time I'm done. Yeah. All right. So, thank you everyone for hanging out with us this evening with this great episode of DnDTime Talks. We hope that you got something good out of this. I know it's always good to go back and cover the basics and hammer this stuff home. So, hope you had a good time. I know Pete and I enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah, and absolutely.
If you have a hankering for more D&D time, you can get it. All you got to do is tune in on Friday for Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time, a show where Pete and myself run 3 1-hour to 2-hour one-shot adventures featuring you all, the chat, or players from you, the chat. It's a lot of fun. It's really cool. New players are welcome. You can learn all sorts about it on our website. You can find links below. Come play some D&D with we. It's a lot of fun.
Please do this. And then tune in on Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific to Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I said it correctly on the first try. Where we're continuing to run through the Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign. Jeremy's been playing it.
Good this week.
He says this is the week it's supposed to get spicy. I'm excited for it.
I think so.
Gotta talk to a horse, I think, at some point. We'll see how it goes. Should be a lot of fun, as it always is.
Absolutely. It's going to be a blast. So I think that just about does it. For those of you who are still going to be hanging around and want more D&D, but can't wait until Friday, check out Maddie Morgs.
Yes.
Maddie Morgs, live on Twitch TV/Maddie Morgs, I think in about half an hour. Maybe more, Maddie. Let us know in the chat otherwise. You can either head over there or just stay here. We'll be hosting him. So we'll see you all there. I guess not without further ado. With much further ado,
he's Jeremy.
And he's Pete.
And
this is DnDTime Talks. Oh, wow, that was bad. Good night.
Good night, everybody.